She had promised herself she would not open that door. Not because she did not know who was on the other side, she knew the moment she heard the knock. She stood in her hallway, her hand not quite touching the handle, and told herself to leave it. To let him stand there until he understood what it felt like to be on the outside. She opened it anyway. He was drenched. Completely and thoroughly drenched, his black dress shirt clinging to him with soul rain running freely down his jaw. Jang Min-jun, who was always composed, who had never once in her presence looked like anything other than a man in complete ownership of every room he occupied, was standing at her door looking like someone the night had defeated. Without calling, without a plan, she could tell because there was no performance in him tonight, no careful framing, no controlled delivery. Just a man standing in the rain outside her door, and he was not going to pretend otherwise. She held the door and looked at him and said nothing. He told her she had not left his mind. He told her he could not focus, that he had tried to stay away and kept failing, that he did not know how to be the person standing at her door at 11 at night in the rain, but that she had apparently made him into that person, and he needed her to know it. She listened to every single word. She felt every single word. And when he was done, she looked at him for a long moment, this powerful, drenched, undone man who had shown up at her door with nothing but the truth and the rain, and she said, quietly and without flinching, "It's late and I appreciate you coming. I hope you drive safe. And what we are or aren't has already been decided by you in your kitchen on a Tuesday morning in the same voice you used for work briefs." She closed the door. She stood with her back against it. She could hear the rain. She could hear him still standing on the other side, and she did not know which was worse, the possibility that he had already gone or the possibility that he hadn't. Her back slid down the door slowly until she was sitting on her own hallway floor, and everything she had held together for the 60 seconds he was standing there came apart now, in the dark of her own hallway, with the rain loud against her windows and her heart doing something she did not have a clean word for. She did not know if she had just protected herself. She did not know if she had just made the worst mistake of her life. She sat on that floor for a long time, and the rain kept falling, and Seoul kept moving, and neither answer came. Welcome to Afro-Korean Love Stories. On today's episode 1, I'm bringing you pride, pain, restless nights, rainy doors, and the impossible question of whether a love that started wrong can find its way to something real. If you are just joining us for the first time, hit that like button, subscribe, seat back, and allow me draw you into my world of tales. Tell me in the comments which city you are watching from. I would really love to know. Now, let us get back to this amazing story. 3 weeks before that rainy Thursday night in October, Jennifer Johnson had made a decision on a pavement in Yongsan, with Seoul arriving loudly around her and a phone call to Temi that lasted 40 minutes and covered the full distance between heartbreak and resolution. The decision was simple and total. She was not going to shrink. She had given this man months of her careful attention. She had shown up to his kitchen and cooked eggs in his shirt and asked a question that deserved an answer and received instead a job title. She had carried that quietly, the way she carried most difficult things, with the particular private dignity of a woman who does not need an audience for her pain. And now she was done carrying it. She was going to set it down, right here on this Yongsan pavement, and walk forward without it. She went back to work on Wednesday. She wore the rust-orange blouse. She did her job with the focused completeness that had always been her signature, and she did not look toward the corridor once with anything other than professional attention. She had her hair done on Thursday, a fresh blowout, sitting perfectly, and she walked into that office on Friday like a woman who had recently remembered something important about herself. People noticed, not loudly. She noticed that Min-jun noticed. She did not act on it, or let it affect her that morn. Jang Min-jun had sat across tables from people who wanted him dead and poured their tea with a steady hand. He had made decisions that restructured entire operations without losing a night of sleep over them. He had built a world that ran on his precision and his stillness. He had never once in his adult life lost sleep over a woman. Until now. The first week after the Tuesday kitchen confrontation, he had operated normally. Or what looked like normally from the outside, which in his world was the only version of normal that mattered. He attended his meetings. He made his decisions. He returned calls and reviewed documents and moved through his days with the same unhurried authority that had always been his signature. If something was different underneath the surface of all that, Nobody in his world was positioned to see it, and he was not positioned to show it. The second week was harder. He found himself in her office doorway on a Wednesday afternoon with a reason for being there that he had constructed in the elevator on the way up, and that dissolved the moment she looked up from her laptop and said good afternoon with the same warm professional courtesy she would use with anyone. Not cold, not pointed, just normal. As though the kitchen had not happened. As though the months before the kitchen had not happened. As though he was simply a man she worked for, and she was simply a woman who was very good at her job, and there was nothing between them that the org chart did not already explain. He delivered his constructed reason. She answered it efficiently. She did not invite him to sit down. He went back to his floor and sat at his desk and stared at a document for 20 minutes without reading a single word of it. By the third week, the restlessness had become something he could no longer work around. It was there in the mornings when he woke up earlier than he needed to in an apartment that was very large and very quiet. It was there in the back of meetings that should have commanded everything he had. It was there at night most of all, soles spread below his windows like it always was, the city doing its indifferent glittering business, and him lying awake in the dark cataloging things he had no operational use for. The specific way she laughed. The way she had looked at him across his own kitchen island with her hands around a coffee mug and asked a question he had answered wrong. The way she said his name, not sir, not the careful honorific the rest of the world performed around him, just his name, like he was a person rather than a position. He thought about the man from the events team who had started appearing near her desk with questions that could absolutely have been emails. He thought about this with a specific and unfamiliar feeling that took him an embarrassingly long time to identify correctly. When he did identify it, he sat with the identification for a moment and then filed it under information that required action rather than under feelings that required management, because that was the only filing system he trusted. He was a mafia boss. He ran an organization that made serious men deferential. He had never in his life wanted for anything that was within his power to take. The problem presenting itself was that Jennifer Johnson was not within his power to take. She was within his power to lose, which he had demonstrated with some efficiency on a Tuesday morning, but taking was a different matter entirely. Taking required her willingness. Her willingness required something from him that his entire adult life had not prepared him to produce. He was going to have to go and get her. Not with proximity. Not with office doorways and questions that could be emails. Not with the passive strategy of simply making himself available and waiting for her to close the distance the way the rest of the world always eventually did. He was going to have to go and get her the way people get things they have decided they cannot live without, directly, honestly, at some cost to the version of himself he had been maintaining for 15 years. His pride sat with this information and produced a full week of resistance. His pride had been losing ground steadily for 3 weeks before that. It turned out strong enough to outlast a Thursday night in October when the rain started, and he was sitting in his Yongsan apartment at 11 at night, unable to read, unable to work, unable to do anything except think about a woman in Mapogu who was probably asleep or watching something on her laptop or talking to Temi on the phone, and was almost certainly not thinking about him with anywhere near the frequency and specificity with which he was thinking about her. The thought of that, the possibility that she had actually filed it away, actually moved forward, actually arrived somewhere he was not, was the thing that finally finished his pride off completely. He picked up his keys. He did not think past that. He drove to Mapogu in the rain. Meanwhile, across the city, in a small apartment with good afternoon light that had gone dark hours ago, Jennifer Johnson was doing exactly what Min-June had feared, which was living her life with the full, unbothered completeness of a woman who had decided her worth was not negotiable. She was on her sofa with her legs tucked under her and a glass of wine, and a phone call with Temi that had started as a check-in and become, the way their conversations always became, a full tribunal on the current state of affairs. He came to your office doorway again, Temi said. It was not a question. He had a question about the Hanwha brief. Jenny. It was a legitimate question. Was it though? Jenny took a sip of her wine and looked at the rain starting against her window and said nothing for a moment. He looked at me, she said finally, like I had taken something from him. You have, Temi said simply. You took yourself back. And men like him, men who have never had to reach for anything in their lives, do not know what to do when something they want is no longer simply available. It is new information for him. Let him sit in it. And if he doesn't come back, he will come back. Temmie said, with the calm certainty of someone who had been watching the story from the beginning and could see the shape of it more clearly than the person living inside it. The question is what you do when he does. Jenny was still thinking about that question when the knock came at her door. She stilled completely. The rain was loud against her window. The knock came again, not urgent, not aggressive. Just present. Certain. She already knew. Temmie, she said quietly into the phone. I have to call you back. She did not wait for Temmie's response. She set the phone face down on the sofa cushion and sat for a moment in her cream knit sweater and gray sweatpants. Then she stood up. She walked to the hallway. She put her hand on the handle. She opened it. He was drenched. Completely, thoroughly, expensively drenched, his perfectly tailored black suit darkened by the rain, his black dress shirt clinging to him, jet black hair flattened against his forehead with soul rain running freely down his sharp jaw, sliding over the tattoo beneath his ear, and disappearing into his collar. He was not composed. That was the thing that hit her first and hit her hardest. Jang Min-jun, who was composed the way other people were breathing, who had never once in her presence looked like anything other than a man in complete ownership of every room he occupied, was standing at her door, looking like someone the night had worked over. There was no performance in him. No careful framing. No controlled delivery. Just a man standing in the rain outside her door in Mapogu because apparently that was where he had ended up, and he was not going to pretend otherwise. She held the door and looked at him and said nothing. She gave him nothing to read. She had learned that from him. The silence between them lasted long enough to be uncomfortable for anyone who was not Jang Min-jun. He held it without flinching, just looking at her the way he had always looked at her, with that complete unhurried attention that had undone her from the very beginning, and then he spoke. He told her she had not left his mind. Not for a single day. He said, without smoothness, without the precision she had come to associate with every word he produced, with the uneven honesty of a man who rehearsed nothing because he had not planned to be here at all. He told her he could not focus, that he had tried to stay away and kept failing at it, that he had tried to fill the space with work and the work was not sufficient and had not been sufficient for longer than he was comfortable admitting. That he did not know how to be the person standing at her door at 11 at night in the rain, but that she had apparently made him into that person, and he needed her to know it. That he was sorry. That the Tuesday morning in his kitchen was the most precisely wrong thing he had ever said in his life, and he had said it with such accuracy and such confidence, and had been so completely mistaken that it had taken him 3 weeks of sleepless nights to fully understand the size of his own error. He stopped. The rain filled the silence. He looked at her and waited. Jenny stood in her doorway and felt every single word land exactly where it was aimed. She felt the sorry. She felt the sleepless nights. She felt the 3 weeks of him trying to stay away and failing because she had lived the mirror version of that same 3 weeks and knew precisely what it cost. She felt all of it move through her like weather. And then she felt something else, something older and quieter, and more self-preserving than feeling. The memory of a Tuesday morning. The memory of eggs on a stove and a coffee mug going cold and a man in a full suit picking up his keys and reminding her, in the most even and unbothered voice she had ever heard, exactly what category she occupied in his life. The memory of a pavement in Yongsan and her hand pressed over her chest and the specific weight of being defined by someone who had no right to define her. She looked at him for a long moment. Rain ran down his jaw. He did not move. Then she said quietly, "You told me what I was to you. Clearly. In your own kitchen. In your own words. I appreciate the honesty. The problem with being that honest, Min-jun, is that I believed you. I went home, and I believed you, and I rebuilt myself around the truth of what you said. And now you're standing at my door in the rain asking me to unbelieve it because it's inconvenient for you now." Her voice did not shake. Her eyes did not fill. She held his gaze completely. "I'm not available for that. Go home. Get dry. You'll be fine by morning. You always are." She closed the door. Not slammed. Closed. The same way she always did, quietly, completely, with the full dignity of a woman who has decided that how she exits things is the last form of power available to her. The latch caught softly. The rain continued. She stood with her back against the door. For a moment she simply breathed. In and out. In and out. listening to the rain and the city and the specific quality of the silence on the other side of the door which told her nothing and everything simultaneously. She did not know if he was still standing there. She did not know which possibility, him standing there or him already gone, was the one she was less equipped to handle. Her back began to slide down the door slowly.
She did not stop it.
She went all the way down until she was sitting on her own hallway floor with her knees pulled up and her cream knit sweater soft against the cold of the door behind her and her hands pressed over her mouth. And everything she had assembled and held together and delivered with complete composure for the 60 seconds he was standing there came apart now. In the dark of her own hallway, in the private place behind a closed door, in the specific devastating way of someone who has done what they believed was right and cannot find a single part of themselves that feels good about it. She was not crying because she was weak. She was crying because she was exhausted. Exhausted from wanting something that had cost her so much. Exhausted from protecting herself from the same person she most wanted to stop protecting herself from. Exhausted from being strong in doorways when every honest part of her wanted to reach out and pull a drenched man inside and tell him that she had not slept properly since a Tuesday morning in his kitchen either. She did not know if she had just protected herself. She did not know if she had just made the worst mistake of her life. The rain kept falling outside. Soul kept moving. The door at her back was solid and cold, and on the other side of it was either a man standing in the rain beginning to understand what it actually cost to lose her, or an empty corridor, which would be its own kind of answer. She sat on her hallway floor and held both possibilities, and neither one felt like relief. Her phone buzzed on the sofa in the other room. Temmie. She already knew. She did not get up immediately. She sat for a little while longer in the dark of her own hallway with the rain outside, and the tears coming quietly, and the weight of a door that was closed and a heart that was not. Not entirely, not completely, no matter how much she had tried to make it so. Then she wiped her face with the sleeve of her cream knit sweater. She pressed her palms flat against the floor. She stood up. She went to call Temmie back. Hey girlies, this is the part of the story that I keep coming back to. Because Jenny did not close that door because she did not want him. She closed it because she remembered who she was before he decided she was worth showing up for. She closed it because a woman who has rebuilt herself once already knows the cost of tearing herself down again for someone who has not yet proven he is worth it. But here's what I want to ask you. At what point does protecting yourself become punishing someone who is genuinely trying? At what point does knowing your worth become the very thing that costs you the love you actually want? Tell me what you think. Tell me which city you are watching from. And do not move. Let's find out who this decision breaks first, Jenny or Minjun. She woke up on Friday morning with puffy eyes and a clarity that surprised her. Not the clarity of resolution. Nothing about this situation was resolved. But the clarity of a woman who had cried everything out and arrived on the other side of it. She had done what she needed to do. She had said what needed to be said. And now the next move belonged to him entirely, and there was a specific freedom in that, in having placed the weight of this thing back in the hands of the person who had dropped it in the first place. She washed her face. She did her edges. She put on a fitted camel-colored turtleneck and tailored dark brown trousers and her good gold hoops, and she went to work. Temmie had talked her through most of it the night before. The phone call that started at midnight and ended somewhere near 2 in the morning had covered the full distance from raw to rational, and Temmie, who had listened to everything with focused attention, arrived at the thing Jenny most needed to hear. You did not close that door because you don't want him, Temmie said, somewhere around 1 in the morning. You closed it because you need him to understand that wanting you is not the same as deserving you. Those are two different things. And right now he only has the first one. What if he decides the second one is too much work? Then you will be sad for a while, Temmie said honestly. And then you will be fine. Because you were fine before him, and you will be fine after him. But Jenny, I don't think that's what's happening. I think that man is going to figure out the difference between wanting and deserving. I think he is going to come back. And when he does, I think he is going to come back correctly. How do you know? Because he drove to Mapogu in the rain, Temmie said simply. Men who are not serious do not drive to Mapogu in the rain. Jenny had almost laughed at that. Almost. She went to work on Friday and was excellent at her job and did not look toward any corridor with anything other than professional attention. She had a meeting in the afternoon that required her full focus, and she gave it her full focus, and at no point during the meeting did she think about rain or hallway floors or the specific way a man's face looks when he has said something true and had it received with a closed door. At no point during the meeting. Almost. Minjun was not in the building on Friday. She noticed the absence. She filed it away and went home and made jollof rice from scratch because cooking was the thing she did when she needed her hands to be busy and her mind to be quiet and her mother's voice in her head telling her that a woman who can feed herself well is a woman who will never be desperate. She was not desperate. She was just waiting. Without admitting she was waiting. Without admitting what she was waiting for. Across the city, Jang Minjun was doing something he had not done in 15 years of running an organization that demanded his complete and constant attention. He was asking for advice. Not from anyone in his world. There was no one in his world positioned to receive what he was carrying without it becoming information someone could use. But from the one person in his life who had known him before the organization, before the power, before the version of himself he had built so carefully over so many years that he had almost forgotten there was a version before it. His older sister Jang Suyun lived in Busan and called him on his birthday and asked him every year whether he was eating properly and whether he had anyone in his life worth keeping. He always said yes to the first question and deflected the second. She always let him deflect because she was wise enough to know that pushing Minjun, she still used his full name, the only person left on earth who did, was like pushing a wall. You waited for the wall to decide to move. He called her on Friday evening. She picked up on the third ring and said, "You never call on a Friday," and he said, "I know," and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Tell me." He told her. Not everything, but enough. He told her there was a woman, that he had handled it badly, that he had shown up at her door, and she had sent him away, and she had been right to send him away, and he did not know how to come back from that correctly. Suyun was quiet for a long time. "What did you do?" she asked finally. "Originally. Before the door." He told her about the Tuesday morning, the kitchen, the brief, the job title delivered in the voice he used for work. Another silence. Longer this time. "Minjun," his sister said, with the particular tone of a woman who loves someone completely and is not going to pretend they have not been an idiot. "You told a woman who cooked you breakfast that she was your employee." "Yes." "In your own kitchen." "Yes." "While she was in your shirt." He said nothing. "Okay," Suyun said. "So, the question is not how you come back from the door. The question is how you come back from the kitchen. The door she can forgive. You showed up, you said the true thing. That counts for something. But the kitchen, that is what you actually need to answer for. And you cannot answer for it with showing up. You cannot answer for it with presence or proximity or any of the things that have always been sufficient for you because you have always been enough simply by being in a room." "Then what?" "You have to say it," she said simply. Not at her door in the rain. Not in a text. Not in an office corridor. Properly. Clearly. In a way that costs you something. In a way that makes it impossible for her to file it under convenience or impulse or a man who got tired of being told no. It has to be the kind of thing she can hold on to. The kind of thing that is still true in the morning. He sat with that for the rest of Friday evening and all of Saturday and most of Sunday. He turned it over the way he turned over operational problems. Methodically, completely, from every angle. What did it mean to say something that cost him something? What did it mean to make it impossible for her to dismiss? What was the version of this that was not showing up at a door, not a text, not proximity dressed as something else? By Sunday evening, he had an answer. It was not comfortable. It required him to dismantle something he had been maintaining for 15 years. It required him to stand in a place with no exit strategy and no controlled outcome and no guarantee that the door would open. It required him to be completely without the one thing he had always used as both his greatest strength and his most reliable protection. Control. He picked up his phone. Not to call her. Not to text her. He made a different call entirely to his assistant with specific instructions for something that needed to be arranged by Monday morning. Monday morning arrived gray and quiet. Jenny walked into the office in a fitted deep burgundy blazer over a white shirt and tailored black trousers, small gold hoops, her Hollywood waves sitting perfectly, looking exactly like a woman who had decided the world was going to receive her fully or not at all. On her desk, beside her laptop, sat a single item. Not flowers, not a card, not anything that could be read as a gesture from a man performing effort. It was a small sealed envelope with her name on it in handwriting she recognized immediately because she had seen it on internal documents for 2 years, and it was as precise and deliberate as everything else about him. She sat down slowly. She looked at it for a moment. She picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead. No corporate language. No careful framing designed to give him an exit if the response was wrong. Just words. His words. Written by hand in the same precise, deliberate script as her name on the envelope. She read them once. Then she read them again. Then she set the paper down on her desk and looked out of her office window at the gray soul morning and sat with the particular feeling of someone who has just been handed something they cannot dismiss, cannot file away, cannot protect themselves against with dignity or composure, or any of the tools they have been using. Her phone buzzed. "Temmie. Good morning. How are we?" Jenny looked at the letter on her desk. "He wrote me a letter," she typed back. 3 seconds. "Jenny. I know. What did it say?" Jenny picked up the letter and read it one more time. She set it down. She looked out the window again at Gray's soul going about its morning. It said everything, she typed. In his own handwriting. On one page. No exit. The reply took longer this time. When it came, it was not the screaming she expected. It was 3 words. Open the door. Jenny sat at her desk for a long time. The letter beside her laptop. The gray soul morning outside her window. The particular weight of a decision that was not really a decision at all. That had perhaps never been a decision. That had been an inevitability from the moment a man walked into a corporate office and made a whole building hold its breath, and she had looked up from her desk and felt something she had been trying to put down ever since. She picked up her phone. She opened his name in her contacts. She typed 3 words and sent them before she could talk herself out of it. "I got it." His reply came in under a minute. "I know. Can I see you?" She made him wait until Wednesday. Not out of cruelty. Not out of strategy exactly. Though Temmie had advised with considerable enthusiasm that she should absolutely make him wait, and that Wednesday was in fact a generous timeline all things considered. She made him wait because she needed the 2 days between his "Can I see you?" and her answer to do something important, to sit with herself and make sure that what she was about to walk toward was something she was choosing with her full self, and not just the part of her that had missed him every single day since a Tuesday morning in his kitchen. She used those 2 days well. She went to the Han River on Monday evening after work and walked along the water in the cool October and had the kind of conversation with herself that required no phone and no Temmie and no one else. Just her and the river and the Seoul skyline and the question of what she actually wanted. Not what was safe. Not what was protected. What she actually wanted. The answer was not complicated. It had never been complicated. She wanted him. She wanted the version of him that appeared in office doorways with questions that could be emails and remembered things she mentioned once in passing and made her laugh without trying and looked at her like she was something he was still fully working out. She wanted that, and she also wanted something he had not yet demonstrated he was capable of sustaining: consistency. Presence. The willingness to define what they were in the daylight, not just at rainy doors and on handwritten letters. She called Temmie on Tuesday morning and said, "I'm going to see him tomorrow," and Temmie said, "Good, Jenny. Don't go in there trying to protect yourself the whole time," Temmie said. "You can have your boundaries. You can know your worth. You can require everything you deserve to require. But you cannot do all of that from behind a wall. At some point you have to actually let him in. Not halfway. Not with 1 foot out the door. All the way. Because that is the only version of this that works." Jenny was quiet for a moment. "What if he hurts me again?" "Then I'd kill him myself," Temmie said simply. Jenny sat with that for the rest of Tuesday. On Wednesday evening, she met him at a small, quiet restaurant in Hannum, dark wood, low light. Not his apartment. Not her apartment. Not anywhere with a door that could mean something. A neutral place. A place that said he wanted to talk and was not assuming anything beyond that. He was already there when she arrived, standing outside rather than waiting inside. He had come early, and he had waited outside in the October cold rather than sit at the table without her, and she did not know why that small detail hit her as hard as it did, but it did. He looked at her when she walked toward him, and something in his expression did the thing it sometimes did. That fractional softening, that brief, unguarded quality that arrived and was gone almost immediately, but not quite quickly enough. He said her name. Just her name. The way he had always said it. With that particular weight that made it sound less like a greeting and more like an acknowledgement of something larger than a name. They went inside. They sat down. They ordered without looking at the menu very much because neither of them had come for the food and both of them knew it.
He spoke first.
He told her he had spent the last 2 days thinking about what he wanted to say and had arrived at the conclusion that there was no version of it that was going to come out correctly if he tried to manage it. So, he was not going to manage it. He was going to say it the way he had written it, without an exit. He told her what he had done in his kitchen on a Tuesday morning was not a mistake in the sense of something he had not meant. He had meant it. He had said exactly what he intended to say, and he had believed, in the moment, that he was being honest and fair and correct. What he had not understood, what had taken him 3 weeks of sleepless nights and a drive to Mapogu in the rain, and a phone call to his sister, and 2 days of sitting with himself to fully understand, was that being correct and being right were not the same thing. He had been correct about the facts, the category, the professional reality of what she was to the firm. All of that was correct. But he had been wrong about what mattered. What mattered was that he had spent months finding reasons to be near her that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with the fact that she was the most alive person he had encountered in longer than he could honestly measure. What mattered was that his apartment felt different after she had been in it. What mattered was that he had stood in his kitchen on a Tuesday morning and watched her walk out and spent 3 weeks discovering that the silence she left behind was not something he could work around. What matters is that I am in love with you. He said it the way he had written it, plainly, without decoration. Not I think I might feel, or there is something between us, or any of the constructions that gave a man room to retreat if the response was wrong. Just the true thing, said directly, with no exit. I am in love with you, Jennifer. I have been for longer than I knew, and I am sorry that I understood it too late to keep you from having to close that door. The restaurant was quiet around them. Low music. The soft sound of other people's conversations happening at a careful distance. Jenny looked at him across the table for a long moment. She felt the words. She felt every single one of them land in the place they were aimed at. That place she had been protecting so carefully for so many weeks. The place behind the composure and the dignity and the closed doors and the hallway floor tears. She felt them land and she did not immediately close them. She let them sit there. Then she said, I need you to understand something. I am not the Tuesday morning version of this. I am not something you can define and redefine based on what is convenient for you. If I open this door, it is open. Not halfway. Not sealed in a compartment. Not something that exists only in your kitchen or my apartment or places where nobody can see it. All the way open. In the daylight. Defined. She held his gaze completely. I need to know that you understand what you're agreeing to before I say anything. Min-jun looked at her across the table, looking like everything he had been trying not to want for the better part of a year, and said, I understand. All the way open. In the daylight. Defined. A pause. Just long enough. I'm not going anywhere, Jennifer. She looked at him for one more moment. Long enough to check herself. Long enough to make sure the part of her that was answering was the whole part, and not just the part that had missed him. Then Jennifer Johnson, who had survived a Tuesday morning in his kitchen and rebuilt herself on a Yongsan pavement and closed a door on a rainy night and sat on her hallway floor and come back from all of it intact and luminous and entirely herself, smiled. Not a big smile. Not performed. Just real. Small and warm and entirely hers. Okay, she said. Just that. Okay. But the way she said it, quietly, completely, without hedging, made it sound like something much larger than a single word. Min-jun looked at her across the table and felt something he did not have an operational word for. It felt like relief. It felt like arriving somewhere after a very long drive in the rain. Some loves announce themselves. They arrive with clarity and timing and all the right conditions, and they are easy to step into and easy to hold. And then there are the other kind, the ones that arrive sideways, dressed as something else in corridors and kitchens and mansion doorways and rainy nights. The ones that cost something before they give anything. The ones that require you to be broken open before you can be put back together correctly. Jennifer Johnson and Jang Min-jun were never going to be the easy kind. She was too alive for easy and he was too armored for it. What they were was the other kind, the kind that had to go all the way through wrong before it could find its way to right. The kind that asked everything of both of them before it gave them anything back. And what it gave them back, in a quiet restaurant in Hanam-dong on a Wednesday evening in October, with the city outside doing its indifferent beautiful business, was something neither of them had a clean word for. But both of them recognized it. It felt like home. Now I want to ask you something. Do you think Jenny was right to make him wait? To require the letter, the restaurant, the words said properly before she opened that door again? Or do you think she should have let him in on the rainy night when he was standing there soaked and finally honest? And what about Minjun? Do you think a man who started this as surveillance, who defined her as an employee, who needed 3 weeks and a sister's phone call to understand what he had, do you think he deserved to get the girl in the end? Tell me in the comments. Tell me which city you are watching from. Tell me whose side you were on from the beginning, and whether this ending gave you what you came for. If this story moved something and you hit that like button, subscribe, and come back for the next episode. Because on Afro-Korean love stories, we are never done pulling at the threads that connect the most unlikely hearts. Every week a new story. Every story, a new world. I will see you in the next one.